Built the plant in 53, Pike and Portsmouth DOE. U-235 in the groundwater chain, heavy metals drift with rain. They cracked the pipes, they dropped the shell, still denied what tests could tell.
Hello.
Open air, no tent in place, children sick, no public trace. Atomic corruption, filed it safe, never discussed. Paper trail burned to dust. You won't find what you won't trust. Atomic corruption.
I'm Dana. Welcome, everybody. These are live. You can call in.
This don't poison in the end. Kids with cancer, no cause named. Dust in schools they never claimed. No
Atomic
swab, no
corruption.
test, no agency, just buried.
By James Lucid. You'll
bureaucracy.
find him on YouTube. You'll find links to his site in the bottom of the description. It's got the biggest collection of anti-nuclear music. In fact, it's so big, it's bigger than the entire planet's previous production of so-called anti-nuclear music. It's pro-life music. It's pro-insects, pro-birds, pro-animals, puppies, whales, and everything else. That's what anti-nuclear is, right? It's pro-Earth, it's pro-species. You can't have species and nuclear industry. Just the radioactive folly from the fuel pools worldwide will cancel all the species. / exterminate them. Here we go. A little early to last week. Tough times. If I don't do the show now, it's not going to get done today. Blah, 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 blah. 709-589-4406. We're in Canada. So I'll apologize right away. I'm sorry, I'm a Canadian. Top 8 myths about Chernobyl that created global chaos. So media is worse than, say, YouTube, because they'll write the most salacious headlines. Desperation to get someone to read it. It's like the industry reads the stuff, but nobody else does. Like your friends, your neighbors, your community, literally, is not going to be reading about nuclear. It's just people with an interest, vested typically interest. I've been thinking about why isn't there a nuclear renaissance? Did it fail because the industry is saturated with idiots, saturated with sadistic monsters and degenerate scum? Could that be it? Is that the secret? Is that what's really going on? Is that why there's no nuclear renaissance? Hell yeah, dog. That's exactly what's going on. The industry is just nothing but scumbags who think they're good people, who somehow or another have convinced themselves that, not that they got a moral compass, there's nowhere that. Let's keep going here. See, the industry's full of scumbags. It's a really strange industry, right? It's a dog-eat-dog industry on top of that. They don't have anybody in the industry a single person, not even a single person, that the world says, you're a pretty nice person. No females at all that can. The females that are there are not very nice people, right? Chernobyl was the worst nuclear accident in history. Like, what are you talking about? Fukushima had 4 reactors, 8 fuel pools, 36 reactor cores. Each reactor core is 100 times the Chernobyl reactor cores because it was pure uranium, pure plutonium. So the minute you see a headline like that, that's the whole story is based around getting this propaganda out there. Chernobyl was the world's worst nuclear disaster in history. That's the propaganda. What you notice over the years is that there can be no doubt that whoever's name is on this story at that media didn't write the story. These are very complicated stories to spin. That works for the International Atomic Energy Agency. Typically, who is writing the stories? Giving it to the media prints it with their author's name on it. Anyway, is my audio better with this wind guards, spit guards? So there's 2 wind guards, 2 spit guards, whatever you want to call it. The idea is to stop my raspy breathing, pops and stuff like that. But because the subject is such a lively topic, in truth, the Fukushima disaster, the Aichi disaster in Japan in 2011 was rated as the same level 7 on the International Nuclear Event Scale, which was created by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is not a regulatory agency. It doesn't have any authority over any nuclear site, plant, etc., 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 etc. But they came to prominence because they're part of the United Nations, which used to be the League of Nations pre-Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's just a dictatorship of 195 militaries, give or take a couple. But once you get once you become part of that particular, dare I say it, family, there is no leaving. Once you join UN, you're a slave. Your country is now completely destroyed. There is no future for your country. And all your resources have to be cannibalized, including you, to keep the United Nations afloat. Its ultimate outcome, it consumes everything on the planet. And it done it to itself on top of that. So to compare Chernobyl to Fukushima is absurd. Or compare Fukushima to, Chernobyl was a single reactor, was a brand new reactor, was a small reactor, was a graphite reactor, and didn't have decades of reactor cores at the top of the buildings. And the list is quite significant. And it was a terrible event. I mean, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom, on the other side of Europe, which meant you contaminated all of Europe too. You should have closed every farm in Europe and abandoned Europe and United Kingdom, Ireland, Scotland. So when Fukushima happened, they had to cover it up because otherwise you had to close every farm on the planet, and the drinking water is not safe anywhere on the planet. So they needed a cover story. Chernobyl was always going to be that cover story because it's been weaponized since it happened. And Fukushima, each reactor is 100 Chernobyls in plutonium uranium. You have 36 reactor cores. So 3,600 Chernobyls is being polite. You're being polite when you do that comparison. That's being nice. Because if you just look at the plutonium X oxide reactor at number 3, that's probably equal to 3,600 Chernobyls on its own. It's the stupidest technology imaginable because it snuffs out all life in increments over a few decades when it's released into the environment. Once you take it out of the reactor core, by the way, the fuel pools are still splitting atoms, the reactor cores. You geniuses on this planet who promote nuclear, I'm talking to obviously. Interestingly, the total amount of radioactive releases by Fukushima has been estimated by recent studies to be greater than Chernobyl in some respects. What are you talking about? Fukushima was 4 reactors. At the top of each of the building was 2 fuel pools with around 8 reactor cores total for each building. That's a total of 36 reactor cores, counting the running reactor cores. 9 reactor cores per building. Because you don't have a repository, they store them into fuel pools. They put the fuel pools at the top of the building. They're on the tectonic plates where this tsunami was going to happen at some point with a 3,000-year legacy of it. 1,000 earthquakes a year. You put it in the most unstable place on the friggin' planet, excuse the language, and it's a disaster now for every species. Interestingly, the total amount of radioactive release to Fukushima has been estimated by recent studies to be greater than Chernobyl in some respects, especially in the contamination of the Pacific Ocean. That's such a delusional statement. Whoever wrote this is the industry. That they're deeply involved, and the other one's going to have permission to put propaganda out. It's going to have to go through the International Atomic Energy Agency first, and they like their chunk of the pie, so they have control over every article. I know that sounds crazy, right? You're like, Dana, that's crazy. No, unfortunately, it's not. You're looking at about 100 a day. That's radioactive fallout after 25 days. I can't remember how many days are in April. It doesn't matter. Say it's almost a month, right? So in another 4 days, it's a month. But look at March the 22nd. That's 11 days. You live in North America or Canada, and then guess what? You were buried. And guess what? By April the 7th, the entire planet is buried in a perpetual snowstorm, invisible snowstorm of radioactive fallout. Both disasters had unique impacts, with Chernobyl fallout spreading across Europe, suggesting what? That and Fukushima is affecting the ocean and local communities. It's absurd that they framed it that way. That's not an accident, see? Right? You want to reinforce the propaganda that Chernobyl is worst nuclear accident in human history, which doesn't work against any scrutiny. They want you to think that Fukushima is only the so-called oceans and local community in Japan. Covered all the water on the planet right away. It's a really important distinction. It's equal to 3,600 Chernobyls. It's an extinction event. Chernobyl is completely uninhabitable was another myth. And they're just reinforcing the typical propaganda, where they say wildlife has returned, a dramatic return of wildlife, including migratory animals like wolves and bears and lynx and rare species of birds that shouldn't be there in the first place. Migratory birds. So this is not insects and biodiversity. This is not biota that breaks down the foliage and the litter in the forest. This is the migratory animals. So you can't call that a dramatic return of wildlife. And the reason they framed it that way is because everything was wiped out. That's why the word's dramatic return. And when I say everything was wiped out, I mean the biota, the fungus, the bacteria in the forest, not just all the insects and creatures and marine species in the rivers and lakes and estuaries and streams and that. Wolves, bears, and lynx. How many times have we seen that where they come out with all kinds of salacious stories and wildlife is so abundant in Chernobyl, right? The tourists are going there to see it. But it's always just, it's never what you would expect in the forest. It's just some big predatory migratory animals. And that distinction we see over and over and over and over. All residents of Chernobyl died from radiation exposure. So this was 7 myths about Chernobyl, was just 7 propaganda stories about Chernobyl is what they put together. So somebody at the International Atomic Energy Agency was full of piss and vinegar and wrote up this story, and he wanted the whole world to get on, bend the knee in front of him and kiss his ring. Although dozens of plant workers, first responders tragically lost dozens. So at least 1 million people worldwide have died from the radioactive fallout alone. I mean, they were going out with buses and guns, jacking people off the streets at gunpoint and taking them to the meltdown where they spend 25 seconds on the roof and then they go back home. Then they're released again. And they get a small pension. When I say small, I mean like $6 or $7 a month for the rest of their lives. And they died horrible deaths. All 600 helicopter pilots died in the first few weeks. Every one of them. Severe radiation poisoning in a helicopter. So imagine what it's like on ground zero for the million people they jacked off the streets with buses and guns. The degenerate agency, UN, estimated that about 4,000 people may... Why are you giving them 2 seconds of your time? Because that's who wrote the article, Dana. Oh, I see. May eventually die as a result of radiation exposure among those most affected. Right, so they're going to, the suggestion is you got some into you, is no big deal. Unless you're right there in ground zero, then it's a bit of a problem. That's what the connotation is meant to invoke into the unsuspecting readers. Right, scientific evidence shows that not all illnesses in the area can be linked directly to radiation, which happens to cause heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. You compromise your immune system, you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. So when they say, that's true of anything, not all illnesses. They could have been poisoned from releases from 3 Mile Island 10, 20 years later. You can still be poisoned. People are still being poisoned, and they can't eat the reindeer in Latvia, for instance. They closed a freshwater fishery in Sweden for 30 years, and after Fukushima, they said, to hell with it. Scientific evidence. Like, when you look at the nuclear industry, the very, very, very last person you're ever going to trust for the rest of your life is going to be a scientist. It's going to be the very last person. The minute you go down that rabbit hole, for instance, iodine-131. Every time I heard the word iodine-131, I'm very disappointed in these people. The radioactive isotopes released in '86 was the stuff you're supposed to be listing is not iodine. Even terrible. Cesium is terrible. Strontium-90 is terrible. Horrific, and it's real. But the biggest byproduct is going to be the curium isotopes, not the strontium iodine. So the iodine, of course, for instance, the iodine, which is dangerous in the first weeks. And so most people see they won't read a paragraph. They might not even read the sentence. They might just read the first couple of words. And the ones that know will read everything, but they already know, right? Just hang on there. So the song I started off with, now I got that in my head, right? Atomic Corruption. That'll be playing through my head for the rest of the show. That's a good thing, don't get me wrong. But that happens so much to me. So a study by the United States Navy, Dr. Raymond Gilmedy at Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico, on beagle dogs and beagle puppies, typically, which killed all the animals, particularly the plutonium. The curium isotopes are the major byproduct in the radiated nuclear fuel. Forget the fact of alphas or gammas and neutrons. Forget that fact. Because it's from a nuclear meltdown. It needs lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. It's got a 240,000 year half-life. There's 10 half-lives, not one. Curium isotopes are the major byproduct. That's in the irradiated nuclear fuel. So once the reactor core comes out and goes in the spent fuel pool, the biggest byproduct is curium isotopes, not iodine, not cesium. And if you take 10,000 studies on radiation, about 100 of them will be on something else. The rest of them will be on iodine or cesium or strontium. It's very difficult to get money to do studies on the real isotopes because, right, you know, because if they start saying curium isotopes and people look up curium, they're going to get scared to death of nuclear for the rest of their life. So they come up and butter you up with their buttercups and sunshine. For instance, iodine disappears after a few weeks, a few months. Oh, well, that was 36 years ago, so I got nothing to worry about. That's the average person's mentality, unfortunately. It's not on purpose, not their fault either. It's just your so-called public school, your number one enemy of education. It's a totally different curriculum of education material than a private school, which is going to teach you the majority of the facts, because they're meant to be your boss. And they can't tell you the facts because you become their bosses eventually. The worst thing you can do is child abuse, send your child to public school. People got no choice, right? But ultimately, when we look in hindsight, that turns out to be child abuse. Not your fault, but the institutions. So its levels are already dropped by more than half since the disaster when they talk about cesium-137. It's very difficult to like anybody in the nuclear industry. Not just because they're idiots, monsters, and degenerate scum, but because they're just unlikable people. They couldn't fit in anywhere, only the nuclear industry, and that's why they ended up there. They have multiple degrees from the university because they can read a book and they can memorize the book, but they can't employ that in real life. So they need a minor their entire life. They're artistically functional. They're functional artistic. A lot of these victims are. That ends up in the industry. It doesn't mean they're bad by proxy. It just means they're incapable of saying no to the nuclear industry. So if nuclear industry, forget the truth, here's the facts. Use these facts only. These are our facts, but they're the truth. So don't worry about that stuff that you learned over there. Only regurgitate what we tell you, and then everything will be fine. And that's the people, the majority of the people in the nuclear industry are in that fraction of the employed in the industry. And then their miners are the monsters, the scum, the degenerates. Ongoing studies 2025 show the radiation in many parts of the exclusion zone decline to levels that allow for short visits. So the studies are external doses, and they're going to be on gamma. They're not going to be on alphas or betas or neutrons. And it might even be just on natural stuff, as we see it too many times. Right. The first studies coming out was, there's more natural stuff in this sample than it was man-made, so therefore it's okay. I was like, holy shit, these people are monsters. You literally, the peer review academics that allow that to be published can imagine what kind of sadistic creatures they are. Chernobyl was brutal, though. I'm not saying it wasn't. Myth number 6, Chernobyl effects are limited to Ukraine. They closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. Well, let's see what the propaganda got for us, out of curiosity. A radioactive cloud drifted across Europe, much of Europe, all of Europe, contaminating parts of Belarus, Russia, Poland, Sweden. And not parts of it. Like, you're talking about a plume that covered the whole planet. It was a terrible accident, terrible event, not an accident. It was bound to happen. They had no containment on top of that. Like a lot of reactors in the United States originally had no containments. Particularly the first reactors they were building at the national laboratories. And Hanford included, right? But what they done at Hanford is just, it's unconscionable, isn't it? 450 billion gallons directly into the soil is equal to an aquarium of nuclear waste 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet. So they already condemned humanity by doing that, see? But that's the industry. It's just, its entire legacy is that kind of, and it's not carelessness, it's just contempt for us and everybody else. They know the difference. They're just monsters and scums, right? And degenerates. That's why there's no nuclear renaissance. You can't. There could easily have been a nuclear renaissance, but real scientists can't get into that part of the nuclear industry because they got a conscience. They have a moral compass. And the industry is terrified. It's terrified of anybody with a moral compass that has a prominence in the nuclear industry, including on my side of the fence, your side of the fence. United Kingdom, which is further away than Belarus, Russian, Poland, Sweden, it's 3,000 kilometers away. They closed 9,400 farms. It meant you're supposed to close all those communities. All the fresh water in the country should have been closed. You should have abandoned United Kingdom. And you still should. They got wind scale there pumping 8 million liters a day into the Atlantic Ocean from a plutonium mixed oxide breeder reactor meltdown. Like, when you look at what this industry had done in its first 10 and 20 years, you could stop the nuclear industry right there and there would be no future eventually. All species will eventually be wiped out because of the releases into the environment are permanent. See, they never go away. And we got nothing with replicating cells, got an autoimmune trigger to defend against this stuff. So it's non-survivable in the long term anyway, the emissions. The bioaccumulation of 1,000 fuel pools splitting atoms into the environment every day. Like, I have nightmares every single night about this stuff. Once I realized what was really going on. And the fact that almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms, if that don't give you nightmares, I don't know what does. That's not an accident. That's to poison you and your loved ones and people far away from nuclear. And they target cities and communities and everything else with this disease food, disease machine food. I call them disease factories because what else would you call them? So let's try to get through this in one. Soil and water samples collected in 2024 still show trace amounts of radioactive isotopes in several European countries. So, like, this is absurd. Because Fukushima drowned out the single of Chernobyl on day 20 or something, worldwide. Like, it's impossible to distinguish wind scale or 3 Mile Island or any of the nuclear testing legacy or Chernobyl or anything else from Fukushima's radioactive fallout. Because Fukushima was the most prolific release we've ever had. 36 massive reactor cores melting down in a 5-day period, atomizing and aerosoling, ionizing and radiating majority of that inventories. Each building was around 6 million pounds, 4 buildings. There's a possibility of 11 million pounds missing or spread worldwide into the biosphere, the ecosystem, from a common spent fuel pool. Right there, there's legitimate speculation right there that that's gone. And the same thing with Reactor 6. My pictures released from TEPCO in 2021 of 736 pictures. I've done a big presentation on it back when the anniversary of March. It's not that far. Well, I produced a lot of material, but it's not that far back. Oh man, I'm up to 93 videos or something. Wow. We're almost up to 1,000 videos on this site. My other site had almost 3,000. And you took my desk site with 24,800 subscribers that I had for 8 years or 5 years. I haven't got a new subscriber on this site in a month. I don't give a shit. Most people who watch this don't even subscribe to me, sure. Soil and water samples collected in 2024. Like, again, that was meant to make you think that there's no other samples out there, only Chernobyl, therefore Chernobyl must be the worst. Whoever wrote the story is quite a scumbag. The spread of radioactive material created political tension, sparked debate about the nuclear safety across the continent, which was a good thing because the industry was so... The industry ruled by the secrecy law enacted during the Manhattan era, say, right when they were trying to produce the bombs. And so they had a stranglehold on your media in order to make that work, and they had a stranglehold on your universities to make that work. And that was their That was their honey basket. The universities are their honey baskets for the idiots, the monsters, and the degenerate scum that they're hiring, right? In the absence of humans, nature surged back with astonishing speed in the absence of humans and species. Forgot to put that part there. Nature has surged back because it was all wiped out. Simply not true. It was wiped out, but it didn't surge back. It can't surge back. It's a nuclear wasteland. It's you have to dig up every blade of grass, every root, and every tree and bush. Right? You have to dig up the top 6 feet of the topsoil, and even then, you're not going to get to everything. And then you have to put everything, every building, every tree, every piece of sidewalk, anything, has to go into a secured repository where it's not leaching back into the environment or emitting back into the environment. And so the stuff that's in the forest is still splitting atoms. So when you talk about wolves, wild boar, and bison, they're talking about migratory animals. They're not talking about an ecosystem, right? They never, when they talk about this, they'll never describe an ecosystem. They'll talk about big migratory predatory animals way up the food chain. So it's a real scumbag industry for using that deceptive, dishonest, and deceitful technique. Since 2011, the Ukrainian government has allowed limited guided tour. Well, first off, they're just a corrupt government beyond comprehensions. And we've covered lots of people that went there. Idiots is the best way to describe it. You're going to a nuclear meltdown, you're an idiot. Nuclear scientists ain't hanging out there because they're not idiots. They're scumbags, but they're not idiots. Well, they said it was safe then. Just shut up. Wolves, wild boar, bison, really? That's a surge, is it? It's a very unlikable industry. The people in it are just, there's no one in the industry that you can relate to. There's no one he reminds me of my uncle, the way he, there's no one there with a moral compass, period. It just doesn't exist there. It'll screw up the rhythm of all the scumbags, right? If you got someone nice there, they'll stand out like a sore thumb. And they'll just, they'll get rid of them. They'll find a way to get rid of them, right? Many people claim the Soviet government completely covered up the Chernobyl disaster. Chernobyl was a government cover-up. Yes, it was, and still is, and always will be. And the full story is more layered. In the first days after the explosions, the Soviet officials did try to hide the scale of the accident. They disappeared an absurd amount of documentation. They disappeared. It has never been found since. Within a year or something like that. The original documentation, the names, the people, the victims they brought in, the list, right, the hundreds of thousands of people they took off the streets and out of the community with buses and guns and brought into that nuclear meltdown and destroyed their health. All that information, documentation was lost. Of course, you can't lose something like that, so it's out there somewhere. It was stolen by the industry, no doubt. Most likely buried in a pit with deformed animals, right? The idea that everything was covered up forever is simply not true. By the late 1980s, the world knew the facts. No, we don't. We'll never know the facts. And so this was whoever wrote this story was very well placed in the industry. They've done this thousands of times. It was a real scumbag from the nuclear industry who wrote that story, I can tell you that much. One of the lowest forms of life are the people that do that, by the way. China's 102 nuclear powered plants could be targets in a future war. Ukraine nuclear plants are targets for the proxy war with NATO. Iran now is being sized up as a probable target for part of the military-industrial complex, and suggesting China now will be targeted in some kind of future war. All of the plants will melt down at the same time if we have a Korean event, if we have a big solar flare hit this planet. Every one of them melt down at the same time worldwide. I think that might be what they're up to anyway. China's PLA warned that the reactors close to the coast could come under attack in the event of a conflict. I wonder who wrote that story. The country has 102 commercial nuclear reactors that are either fully operational or under construction. Well, just because they're under construction, that don't mean jack shit. It makes China atomic energy sector the largest now in the world. Whoopie friggin' do. They're the stupidest people on the planet, in other words. Iran's foreign minister says nuclear enrichment non-negotiable. So all day today, the entire day today, every page of the news cycle today was 3/4 of this type. Like, it's insane. You got to build nuclear weapons so you can have a future. Otherwise, you end up like Ukraine, right? Where they just steal your children as they're on their way home from school or from the shop, put them in a suit, throw them on the front lines where a drone chases them down, runs them around a tree a few times rather, and then blows them up. How did we ever get to this point where you got Eric Schmidt makes 1 million suicide drones a year for the military-industrial complex for Ukraine to chase Russian soldiers, children, in trenches with bombs strapped to them. He charges $400 for each one. Remember that creepy, disgusting parasite Eric Schmidt? Former CEO of Shit for Brains Google. Iran's foreign minister say nuclear enrichment non-negotiable. If they don't get a nuclear weapon, they're going to end up like Iran or Ukraine. They can fight back. Like, in order for this to work, if the Americans want, like, the only way this can work is in order for America to guarantee it, or aka Israel America, to guarantee that Iran has got rid of its enrichment is to occupy Iran. That's the only way they're going to be able to quantify those assertions. So they got to go in and destroy Iran, occupy it for a couple of decades at least. That's what they're talking about. That's what you're talking about militarily. And Iran is not going to go quietly. It's not what it used to be 15 years ago, right? Even then it was a formidable enemy. It's got 9 million soldiers, but it has an arsenal, a huge arsenal in thousands of miles of deep underground tunnels, away where nuclear can get to some of them, multiple nuclear. So, but that's a whole different event again. Say, just a conventional war will destroy Iran, but there's not going to be any winners. All the small bases around Iraq and Afghanistan and Kuwait and everywhere else, all these little small American bases will be flattened in the first week. There's nothing they can do about it either. Israel will cease to exist for the most part in less than a few days. All their nuclear plants are going to be struck back right away. But the only way they can quantify, and this is why you're seeing the media blowed up about it, is to try to subconsciously convince Iran to allow. Now they want access to all their missiles and everything else, which means you got to let them into the thousands of miles of deep underground tunnels that they got to defend themselves. It ain't going to happen. They're suicide. And the madness is if they don't have a nuclear weapon, I'm pretty sure they do. If they don't, they have to create one, because otherwise they're going to end up like Ukraine for sure. And they know it. They already seen what the coalition of the willing was able to do to Afghanistan, Iraq. It's unconscionable. You know who won the war in Afghanistan, Iraq? It was Monsanto. They're not even allowed to grow their hereditary seeds. They're only allowed to grow Monsanto seeds. Washington had maintained that Iran's enrichment facilities have to be dismantled. The only way you can do it is you got to occupy Iran. So you're talking about a war bigger by orders of magnitude than Iraq and Afghanistan. Because Iran can fight back. It's got an absurd amount of sophisticated drones and cheap drones to wear you down first and then send it to sophisticated ones right away. We send in a flotilla of drones so that they use up their defense systems, and then in comes sophisticated drones, highly targeting. And then they're going to have to use nuclear weapons to knock out these waves of drones. Washington has maintained that Iran's enrichment facilities have to be dismantled. That was absolutely everywhere today. Witkoff said that if the talks are not productive, they won't continue and we'll have to take a different route. Well, there's only one route. You have to occupy Iran. That's not going to happen. Well, I shouldn't say it's not going to happen because the industry is pretty disgusting. It could happen. But that's a... Iran's going to take out all the oil ships and oil fields and everything else, and all the gulfs and all the routes are going to be just destroyed. Inflation within 2 weeks will be absurd because the price of gas will go up to $20 a gallon, $25 a gallon. So the amount of inflation you're going to get from that is going to be catastrophic. Like, the second most prolific resource we have is water, and then there's oil. Oil is the second most. There's a lot of oil on this planet. It's like mad amount. They won't continue. We'll have to take a different route. Like, you got geothermal on the planet, but nobody seems to care. Everybody's like, no, it's no good unless it helps the nuclear industry. That's the only reason coal exists, because coal is dirt cheap. Nuclear plants need external power, right? You know, these are small cities where the external power we're talking about. Iran foreign minister says nuclear enrichment non-negotiable. I already done that, didn't I? Trump says he wants total verification that Iran's contested nuclear work is shut down. Well, you're talking about thousands of miles of underground tunnels they'll have to give away all their deepest, darkest secrets, all their self-defense, all their weapon technology, the whole, anything capable. And we already know that Iran has lots of technology capable of carrying a missile, a nuclear warhead, I should say. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has insisted Tehran must give up the uranium enrichment. So you have a lot of these senators and congressmen coming out there's a big media blitz today, yesterday too certainly, but today is really something. It's just deafening amount of stories, propaganda. Is Canada's new global force in nuclear power as a small modular reactor construction begins in Ontario? Like, what are you talking about? The boiling water reactor 300 doesn't even have a full application into the regulatory agency. These are not small, by the way. Just give me 1 second. These are skyscrapers, 24-story buildings. They're calling small modular reactors for some reason. Canada, what are they going to do with you? I got to find that story because I was trying to think of it last night. I can't remember what I That's it there, I guess. No. Just bear with me, please. My apologies. I was trying to find a story. I know I've got it in my shit piles, but they're going to take a minute. I'll make you lucky here. We're almost... It's unbelievable what I got collected, don't it? Well... Not looking good. We're almost true. Yeah, you would think it'd be that hard to find it. I don't do... My apologies, but let me just try one more time here. I don't know, yeah, it's a good story then, I don't know. Should have been right here with that pile, it's not. Anyway, Canadian reactors are 24-story buildings, half of it's underground. 240-foot tall buildings. They're 50 feet taller than Fukushima's reactors, were 190 feet, 19-story buildings. The Canadian small modular reactors are skyscrapers. Canada's first small modular reactor, I'll be damned, which is the Boiling Water 300, which is a 24-story building. Half of it's underground, but still a 24-story building is not a small modular reactor. And it's going to be using, in order for it to work, even though it's a massive building, 50 feet higher than Fukushima reactors, which were close to a gigawatt each, it's only 300 megawatts. It's less than 1/3 of Fukushima-sized reactor. And on top of that, for that to work, it's going to be plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is supposed to be illegal in Canada. So they still haven't changed the laws to make it legal to use that fuel. So I would assume that they already got that tied up. Positioning Ontario as a leader in clean energy. It's the dirtiest technology imaginable. It's massive resources. And you're going to build 3 of them. And it's going to be 20 billion Canadian. So almost $7 billion each. Which doesn't even make sense because you're seeing South Korea is building reactors for $6 billion that are close to a gigawatt. So why would we take 1/3? As far as I know, they don't have a full application to a regulatory agency. And so their version of building is a different version than a typical person would assign to it, right? And then you had the mayor, who now, he's the premier, is he? Doug Ford is now the premier of Ontario. Oh my God, boy. How is that even possible? His brother was a crackhead, used to be in the government. Basically paid him to quit, gave him a pension, gave him a huge settlement. Instead of firing him because he was a scumbag idiot, like a typical nuclear scientist. Boiling Water Reactor X, 300 small modular reactors. This is absurdness because it's a 240-foot building. It's a 24-story skyscraper. And they're, oh no, it's a small modular reactor, Dana. You can put it in the back of a pickup truck. When you turn the lights on in your living room, you may not think about where that power comes from. Of course you do, because you got massive bills every month. And a large percentage of that was supposed to go towards replacing the power, not experimenting with nuclear. Because the ratepayer is not only paying for it, their bills are increasing. Because it's experimental, so they're allowed to do it. So they're going to go ahead and do it. And they already have. Oh, a 4-reactor project is $5 billion each. My bad. He's going to hire 18,000 people. Now you can put double the power by using, well, triple the power, quadruple the power rather, if you go geothermal, and you'll have it up and running in a couple of years. Ontario, the same place where they're doing this, 2 years ago canceled 700 solar and wind farms in Ontario because they were a competition for the nuclear industry's hopes and perverse dreams. No nuclear power plant of any type has ever come in on budget. The last nuclear power plant they built in Canada bankrupted Ontario Hydro. It went out of business because of the last nuclear plant that was built here. A global leader in the next generation of clean energy. Whoever wrote that is clearly a moron. Yes, scientists create the ultra-rare hydrogen-6 isotope, defying nuclear physics. As always. And I give you this stupid looking. It's an extremely neutron-rich isotope. And you wouldn't believe the amount of money they spent on this one. If they took, and they studied the man-made elements, orders of magnitude more than they have the stuff from the solar system. They're obsessed with man-made isotopes. The whole industry worldwide is. And they kill billions of creatures a year with anthropogenic man-made isotopes, looking for the so-called cure to everything, right? The elixir, the magic potion to cure anything. They haven't cured nothing. That's the madness of it. Is every hospital is poisoning the patients with anthropogenic man-made radiation. If I took the same radiation that they're sticking into cancer patients or beaming on the cancer patients and just done it to a random person here, that's a crime against humanity, right? They do documentaries on how evil it was. You take the same technique and go to a university or school or a hospital and kill 1,000 patients a year with it, and you're the heroes of the community. It's a lunatic. The whole industry is lunatics. One of the most fundamental questions in nuclear physics is how neutrons can be bound in an atomic nucleus with a given number of protons. If you took half the energy to put it, or even a thousandth of the energy to put into this to solve geothermal, we wouldn't need gas, oil, or coal, or nuclear, would we? They put all their money into this, they won't put nothing into geothermal. They build the stupidest contraptions. Now these contraptions that you're looking, these are on wheels too. All of this could move, right? These people are lunatics. And they're usually the inbreeds of the scum of the nuclear industry, and they get a cushy job somewhere safe like this, right? But we've seen so much of this over the years. There's this disconnect from what's important. The only thing that's important to them is the anthropogenic man-made radionuclides. And they can be as kooky as they want to be. They'll get funding for it. And if you look at the money that's being thrown each year, or even each week at fusion and at small modular reactors, that's about 200 companies. There's 100 companies of fusion that started up in the last few years. In the last 5 or 6 years, there's basically 100 small modular reactor companies. And some of them are on the stock markets. We might get to that story coming up in a bit. The nut jobs. Raising concern about Iran's peaceful nuclear work while ignoring Israel's nuclear is unacceptable. Well, Israel's the only one allowed to have a nuclear down there. The problem is if Iran gets nuclear, Israel can't bully him anymore, and he can't bully anybody else because Iran now can say, hey, smarten up. And they're terrified they can't be monsters anymore, right? So they got to stop Iran from getting nuclear because otherwise Israel can't be a monster that it is. Man, when you talk about a failed society, Israel is way up there. It's probably the worst country I've ever seen. The people are completely delusional on top of that. You can't have a conversation with a single person. Iran has called attention to double standard in the international community regarding nuclear weapons, calling it unacceptable for Western powers to raise alleged concerns over the country's peaceful nuclear energy program while overlooking the Israeli regime's extensive nuclear arsenal. Israel is the greatest threat to the regional peace. I agree. I think anybody will agree with that. It's just a terrible country. They're just terrible people. They're the biggest welfare state on the planet. They're given everything they could ever dream of, and they're so delusional. They think they're better than everybody else on the planet. They think nobody else should be allowed to criticize them or somehow or another. Right? They hide behind the skirt of anti-Semitism. And they're not even Semites themselves, for goodness sakes. They're coming from all over the world. They're not originally from there. Their parents weren't, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, their great-great-grandparents weren't from there. Palestinians are Semites. So Israel is anti-Semite to the Palestinians, right? Pointing again to the Israeli regime's nuclear weapons program. New study puts the true death toll in Gaza at around 100,000. It's way worse than that. Like, you don't know how many people are dead under these piles. The whole country's like that now. They wrecked the entire... The first thing they done was they got rid of all the artifacts. All the museums were destroyed. All the banks were looted. All the schools were flattened. All the universities were flattened. Anything with the word Gaza or Palestine on it is immediately sought upon by the children in the military. They destroyed the entire history of the country. That was the basic target, right? And the fresh water of the country, so there's no way they can come back. It really is just a horrific crimes against humanity. It's a Holocaust. They're carrying out a Holocaust way worse than what allegedly happened to them, right? Compiled a list based on social media obituaries, death announcements, hospital records, online civilian death submissions, and an independently compiled list. Well, it's got to be way over 100,000. It's absurd to suggest it's a lousy 100,000. Israel, the lunatic moron, describes all those killed in Gaza as fighters. Most of them are women and children. Anybody who even lifts their head up and looks at them is considered an enemy, right? Additionally, death caused indirectly by the war, such as from collapses of medical services. They destroyed every hospital, every doctor's office, every doctor they could kill, every ambulance they can blow up. That's never been done to them. Imagine if you'd done that to Israel. Imagine the whining and sniveling and crying you have to listen to every day. We're the Jews, everybody hates them. Israel launched intensive Gaza offensive to relocate Palestinians. They're not relocating. It's a torture. It's crimes against humanity. It's a Holocaust, what they're doing. They got over 4,000 of these tanks that are shooting 155 millimeter depleted uranium rounds, for goodness sakes. Dirty bombs. They've never fought a real army, right? If they fight Iran, they're done. Even with the American, the British, the French, Israel cannot fight a real war. It can only shoot fish in a barrel. That's all it's ever done. All of their bravo from their soldiers, their heralds, is based upon shooting fish in a bowl. They're not real soldiers, real military, real navy, or any shape or form of it. They've never fought a real enemy. They have no right to call themselves soldiers. They've only fought the most vulnerable of society. They have the right to be called cowards. Israel launched an intensive Gaza offensive to relocate the Palestinians. Intensive. And they're showing the tanks. And they never fought a military with tanks, the military with fighter jets, the military with drones, the military with fighter jets, fighter helicopters, the military with a navy. They've never fought a military. They have no concept of what a real war is. Figures show 90% of the Gaza's current population, a little over 2 million people, have been displaced, lacking access to shelter, food. They're starving. They're emaciated. You see endless footage of emaciated people. They have no water, no services, no institutions. It's all destroyed. Israel couldn't care less. They laugh about it constantly. It's a big joke to them. They just don't have any human attributes whatsoever. I've never seen a military so revolting in my life. And, of course, the military is not meant to be a good person, right? It's meant to kill for some ideology of a politician. I got a lot of friends joined the military when I was young. I know, right? A lot of people, that's just a spot for them to get an education, a spot for them to get a job for a lot of people, right? I get that. People don't think about war and stuff. They think about getting a job and getting out of their towns or something. Dismissed from their jobs. 18 people were fired. So let me get back to that. Rooppur Nuclear Power Plant project. 18 officials, employees dismissed from their jobs, banned from entering the project, a nuclear construction site. I wonder how many years behind schedule and billions of dollars over budget they're going to be. In Bangladesh. They were employed at the nuclear power plant company Bangladesh Limited. All of them get a 3 months salary for early. They got to take care of their own. They don't want too many lies spread. Trump considering executive order to speed construction of nuclear plants. No, he's not. And this is seeking alpha, for goodness sakes. Why in goodness gracious would you believe seeking the disgusting seeking alpha? I wasn't expecting to get a show and tell you the truth. So I said, you know what? I'll just go ahead and do the show. People can watch it later. That seemed to be like a trend this last week, but that's only because I'm slowly getting back to normal after the Friday's nightmare. Until it's going to take me a couple of days to get my brain to work again. The executive orders would set a goal of quadrupling the size of the U.S. fleet of nuclear power plants from nearly 100 gigawatts of electric capacity today to 400 gigawatts by 2050. So that's, well, it's 0.8 gigawatts for a plant. Oh, I left my phone out there. Hang on, I'll be right back. Hang on. Hang on, James. I left my phone out the holder. Just give me a second there. That was funny.
Yeah.
I can hear it out there. I was like, what? I can hear it cracking away out there. All right, buddy, you're live.
Yeah,
Hi, James.
I just wanted to call. I can't believe how weird this is, because it just feels like I was working on my latest track that I'm trying to get exported right now.
Awesome.
But it was based off way before your show. I was just reading this story about General Fusion laying off their workers up in British Columbia. I guess
right.
This was a story a few days
right.
ago.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm just laughing at it because something about it kind of just, it struck this chord where I'm like, I want to do something whimsical about this. Like these people, they shouldn't even be messing with fusion when we have this huge mess left with fission. What's going on here?
Yeah, they harassed me. They harassed me. They harassed me like a decade ago, right? I know. I know some of those people out there.
So ridiculous. But anyway,
I think it was a money grab, right? Is why they set up shop.
Right.
Right, because it was trendy to set up a fusion company. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, so it's the latest thing I was working on was just kind of based off this whole idea that, we get, I don't know what it's going to take for the world to understand that, this is so out of control. Everything you brought up tonight.
Yeah.
It's just so real. I mean, it's just so ridiculous that we can't get the world's attention on the biggest thing that's happening right underneath us. And we celebrate. The government celebrate. They're all
it's
in on
everywhere
it.
too, right? Yeah. Oh, hang on there. I dropped my phone. Keep. Try.
It's just.
I had it. I think I had the phone. I had the phone in the wrong direction. Go ahead.
Well, it's just madness. It's just complete. It's insanity that it's even allowed. That there's just there's nobody looking over all of this and saying, "Hey, we got a problem here. Why are we investing in this crazy dream?
Pipe dream, yeah.
It's one
good
thing
point,
if you're
man.
going to have a huge startup, right? If it's in space, go have your space station run off fusion or something. Like, leave it alone on Earth. What's wrong with you people?
Yeah, no kidding, man. No kidding.
But
it's such a dangerous technology to play with, right?
Right. But it just centered this whole thought, like, how do we like turn the culture into making them realize that being anti-nuclear is cool.
Yeah.
Like, that's the cool thing.
It is. I never heard anybody say that before. It really is cool, right? It's at some point it'll be trendy, but how do we get there? Like I have great hope.
Exactly.
I have great hope with your music. That eventually that's eventually going to crack one of the taboos where it's going to find its way out there, and people are going to go, "Holy shit!" Because that'll resonate for people. See?
Because that's what this track. I'll get it. Let me get off the phone with you. I'll get it uploaded. But
yeah,
that's what it's all about. That's what it's just this stupid, whimsical, like, ha ha. I'm going to put in the description, like, this is dedicated to the laid off workers at General Fusion. You should go work for General Geothermal instead. Like,
if you took those, and you're 100% right on that train of thought. Like, if we took these people and put them to work on geothermal, we would solve all of our problems in 6 or 7 months, right? 6 or 7 months, we would solve any issues with geothermal. Not that there's many issues. It's just for the deeper, higher temperatures. Go ahead.
Right, and it's madness too, because these stupid stories out there. Oh, AI, these data centers, they need nuclear energy. No, they don't. This is all a scam.
Well,
data centers can afford. They can afford to make their own damn power on site. They don't need to be on the grid at all. Like, what's wrong with these people?
Well,
all a scam.
Well, that's an interesting point you brought up. Those companies are on the stock market. If you're on the stock market, you're not paying federal, state, local taxes. That money's going in offshore accounts. That's free money. That's a lot of money too. And so they could easily, build their own power plants. And right, but they use that money to pay off fines, right? Because they can't go to jail. Go ahead, James.
But no one's hearing that, so I guess we just have to bring it. I don't know. It's just. But anyway, let me let you go. Let me get this up. I just had to call because
that's great.
I felt in sync with it somehow.
Yeah, you got my brain. You got my brain working that time too, buddy. that helped. Okay, you get that song up because I'm probably only going to last another 20 minutes, half an hour or something, right? And then.
Oh no, it'll be up by then, definitely. All
okay,
right,
looking forward to it, buddy. Loves you, buddy. God bless you, man.
All right.
Yeah, bye-bye. That was James Lucid. I'll turn the volume down. I just turned it up so we can take James' call. Let me check and make sure that. Yeah, that worked. Yeah, I had bought another clip to put the phone. It's still out in the truck. And we got a bunch of parts showed up today. We haven't got the tools, but they'll be here by tomorrow or Tuesday. But we got the 10-piece suspension part for the front of my truck. Really nice. Wow. That's really nice stuff, folks. That's a big deal. That was a big deal to see that show up. That's like, okay, that's the biggest part of the issue, right? We have to rebuild the suspension to keep the machine operational. And it's even worse. I was underneath it yesterday. I had bought a needle for the grease gun. And, it's even worse than I thought it was. Well, not thought it was. I had looked at it before. I didn't realize the boots and the ball joints were that damaged. There's 10 of them altogether. 12, 13, 14 I'll be replacing. Replace everything underneath it, right? We already replaced the back springs, both sides. And so, and so I replaced the two front shocks a few days back. And I ordered in the back shops. It turns out I thought I was getting two for the price. You're only getting one, so I got to order in another one. So I'll have all new springs, all new shocks, and all suspension and stabilizing kit. And the bushings all replaced eventually over the next week or two. That'll all be, because it's a lot of work, right? But then you got a whole new, it's like a new truck underneath at that stage, right? So that's a big deal. Because spring is coming. We're still in winter here. So let me check the audio because we changed it. Mic check. I'll probably turn it up a bit, can I? Mic check. 1, 2. How about right there? For the rest of the show. I don't know. It's so windy. I don't know if you guys can hear it on your side. James made a really great point. And I also got my brain working that time too, so that was a bonus, right? We like that stuff. Yeah, and I have this little cloth here, right? That little cloth. That's where I laid a cell phone on. I was playing with that when the phone rang out there, and it didn't strike me that the phone wasn't there. I had that cloth there, and I was just fiddling as I was talking. For some reason, that didn't resonate, and my brain didn't say, hey, go get the phone, stupid. I was just right in the hallway there in the studio. The executive orders would set a goal of quadrupling the size. Let's get back to that one. This is absurd story. That's what now I remember. Let me go back to the headline. Executive orders speed up construction of nuclear plants. Where am I to? There we go. So you're looking at, because you're talking about 0.8 gigawatts is a large nuclear plant. So it's 350, 400 nuclear power plants you're talking about. And then you were talking about like 1,500, 2,000 or more small modular reactors to get the same. You'd have to, over 25 years, I don't know what the numbers are. 15 a year or something for large reactors, and 40 or 50 for small modular reactors each year to reach that goal. So what they're trying to do is, I guess they're going to start inflating or start promoting stocks in small modular reactors and fusion again for another grab of the unsuspecting investors, right? Oh, excuse me. The two most recent reactors built in Georgia cost $35 billion plus, and the ratepayers are still paying for that, by the way, even though it never came, or the other ones that didn't come to fruition, and those, and double the initial estimate and arrived 7 years behind schedule. They were lucky to get it at all. Westinghouse went bankrupt, right? Nuclear-related energy stocks rallied during the past week, and what's going on with that? How come I'm not getting that news cycle of stocks on nuclear stocks for the last 3 weeks or something like that. I don't think I've seen a single one. I had to look it up today to find just a single headline. We usually cover that every 3 or 4 days at least. And we talk about the scam. So maybe they're censoring that from my search engine. U.S. fires up Nike laser monster. Any monsters out there are pro-nuclear. The world's strongest beam is now tapped to supercharge next-generation nuclear warheads. I read that. I was a little bit worried. I was like, oh, shit. They found another way to be evil, did they? But what it is about verifying models. A lot of these fusion reactor experiments and small modular reactors, that's simply about verifying a mathematical equation a lot of the times. And it's put under this cover story of something different, typically. That's how they do it. The U.S. is leveraging the unparalleled power of a Nike laser, which is a krypton laser, to simulate the extreme conditions faced by nuclear weapons, aimed to enhance its nuclear deterrent capabilities and maintain a technological edge over the global adversaries. Well, we don't need anything more sophisticated, do we? Do we really need any more sophisticated nuclear weapons? We don't have enough to blow the entire planet up yet? Are you kidding me? We don't have enough to destroy a country on a push of a button? We've had that for 60 years or more. Right? It's just the nuclear industry is just, you can't even use the weapons anyway because everybody loses. What do you mean nuclear war? Nuclear war is the end of humanity, the end of species. Like their versions of it. We already had nuclear wars, and now we hardly got any species left. You call it nuclear testing, I believe. The initiative aims to enhance nuclear deterrent capabilities without actual setting off nuclear weapons. The world's most powerful krypton fluoride excimer laser. The world's most powerful. Until tomorrow when they wake up and come up with a better one. A more stupider one. Fourth round of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks. You can tell he's just a moron. You can tell her she's like an old shoe. People like that is like having a 5-gallon bucket. Needs to be dismantling of the Iranian nuclear facility. Wait no. There need to be a dismantling of Iranian nuclear facilities, Democratic lawmaker argues. Moskowitz, is that an Israeli name? Something? So, the only way you're going to do it is if you occupy Iran. That's the only way that you're going to be able to verify anything is you got to destroy Iran and occupy it and the thousands of miles of underground tunnels. Iran is going to fight a war. Iran will go to war. Yeah, eventually they're both going to be, everybody's going to get destroyed in that equation. Trump's trip to Saudi Arabia raises the prospect of U.S. nuclear cooperation with the kingdom. Well, if the Americans don't give them the technology to enrich the uranium, somebody else will, right? Right? Saudi Arabia, they got oil coming out of their eardrums all the time. Like the Navy ships are not going to go electric. They're not going to go away in the next 50, 100 years. Right? The oil is not going to go anywhere. It's about keeping you off balance, keeping you on one foot on two toes or on your heel. So you don't come up with solutions. Saudi Arabia wants the United States help developing its own civil nuclear program. It only wants it. It doesn't need anything. It got so much oil. It doesn't need anything else. So it's looking for nuclear weapons capabilities, right? And the Trump administration, not Trump now, but the administration, the United States administration says It's very excited at the prospect. Like the nuclear industry is bird brain material. They've never come up with their own design in the last 80 years. They're just working on an old design. Everybody's using the same designs, the same patents they got for fusion are like 1904. Right? There's no innovation in the nuclear industry is what I'm trying to say. Despite that eagerness, there are obstacles, including fears that helping the Saudis fulfill their long-standing desire to enrich their own uranium as part of that partnership would open new rounds of nuclear proliferation competition. Well, they're going to do it anyway because India will give it to them, Pakistan will give it to them, Russia will be happy to give it to them, China. And so that's the thinking, right? Britain must increase its nuclear arsenal as tensions continue to rise globally. What do you mean it needs to increase it? They could have bought everybody an ostrich for the money they spent on their last round of nuclear weapons. You know, they could have built 1,000 hospitals and they could have took care of their veterans and their elderly. Like that's going to happen. Are they bringing 2 million invaders now in the last couple of years? It's almost a Muslim country now. Muslims down there praying in the street all the time, sure. Blocking traffic. And I mean, there's... the police in the United Kingdom have turned on the white population, and the Muslim population are getting less time in jail for the same crimes. They're getting more money for the same jobs. The invaders, right? I think that was Israel was behind all of that by the sounds of things. Right, drive the country nuts, so don't pick on Israel. Britain must increase its nuclear... I'm not kidding you. Britain must increase its nuclear arsenal as tensions continue to rise globally. Well, do you need more of this? You can't use the nuclear sub. You can't use the nuclear weapon. You can have your toys, go out there and play stupid all you want, but you can't use your nuclear weapons. So just put duds on these things. You're not going to use them. Why take the chance and poison humanity for 1 trillion years? And of course, the United Kingdom nuclear industry is just disgusting and gutless. It's deplorable. Right, they're a strange one, to say the least. They're gruesome. The nuclear industry is really... nuclear industry looks... they wrote, this would be fine in the United States, which has also developed sub-strategic nuclear weapons. We're a 100% reliable ally, but warned that there's no longer the case under the Donald Trump administration. And that was a really interesting development, right? Where when Donald Trump became president, therefore America no longer existed. Now it was everybody's enemy, and everybody had to get their own nuclear umbrellas. And remember all the hoo-ha-ha that came along with that? As concerns continue over Washington's commitment to European security. India and Pakistan agreed to a ceasefire, then resumed the fight. So India and Pakistan have been very aggressive speech. Like we had at one point there, about a week and a half ago, you had a Pakistani railway minister coming out and threatening India with nuclear weapons. Like it doesn't make any sense. And all the media was happy to put him on a pedestal. And he looked like he wanted to beat somebody up every time they showed a picture of him. He looked like he was ready to grab someone by the throat. The deal was aimed at halting a flare-up that killed dozens and pushed the nuclear-armed Let me fix that. I'm stupid. Let me turn that off for a minute. We're almost through. We've just got another couple of stories. Good stories, though, to get through. And James got a new song. Shared Colette donated $65 today. Bless your heart, Colette. How's the poll doing? Did the nuclear renaissance fail because the industry is saturated with idiots, monsters, and degenerate scum? I mean, how else would you look at it? How else could you describe this industry? And would that make more sense? That they won't let anybody with a personality into the nuclear industry. There's some kind of bizarre not bizarre, but understandable jealousy, right? Because if you bring somebody into the nuclear industry that is charming and smart and witty and funny and beloved by the population, it won't be long before they quit their job because they understand the true horror of the industry. They just run away. And so only a person that is of true mind and heart and soul can portray that energy, right? That the population would respond to, for instance, right? But a pro-nuclear scumbag is not going to have that charisma. There's not going to have that. Is not going to be able to penetrate the media, the world, because they recognize stupid and idiots and monsters and degenerate scum. Tabs on the other window. The truce was announced Saturday by President Donald Trump as it was a result of a long night of talks mediated by the United States, which is absurd. They just got to poke their nose in everybody's business because we're talking about the nuclear industry, right? Royal Hospital achieves highest quality standards in nuclear medicine endorsed by the International Degenerate Agency. I cracked up laughing when I seen that one. Not in a good way either. That's not it. That's not it. That was it there, right? I jumped out of my spot here. I moved that up here to where it belongs. There we go. Royal, so basically you're talking about radiation therapy, right? Hang on for a second. Let me explain that to you. There's a simple way to articulate what that actually means. And a lot of these people, they think they're doing a moral and ethical thing. They're really proud of themselves, right? Not all of them. Let me just kind of help you. So here's what radiation therapy is really like. Radiation therapy, you might actually cure, per se, temporarily, remission of a tumor. It'll come back anyway, because radiation is not a cure, clearly. I like to say if they actually cured an animal with radiation, they would have took his carcass, put it on a big transport truck and brought it to every school on the planet. Made the kids all walk right through it and look at this animal that was cured. It was cured. Introduction to radiation injury, another silent epidemic. Radiation injury, radiation therapy / radiation injury. Radiation injury / radiation therapy to the visual pathways. Radiation injury to the hearts. Radiation injury, cardiac injury following treatment for breast cancer. Because the radiation, you end up with 6 or 7 other tumors. You got rid of one tumor, now you got 6 or 7 other tumors. And this is where they show up. Radiation-induced cardiac injuries. Radiation-induced kidney injuries. Induced kidney injuries. Hypoxia, because you kill all the cells in your body. Blood spinal cord barrier disruption, central nervous system radiation injury from radiation therapy. All of this is radiation therapy. Radiation-induced lung injuries from radiation therapy. Radiation-induced bowel injuries. Laser treatments of severe radiation injury to lower gastrointestinal tracts. It's a death sentence, right? Radiation-induced kidney injuries. Radiation injury litigation. Central nervous system radiation injury. Injury to the cranial nerves following proton beam radiation therapy. It's like the whole story just doesn't even make sense that it still exists. Eh? Radiation injury to the head and neck. Assessment of radiation-induced brain injury. You wouldn't believe the overwhelming amount of studies from different institutions on brain damage from radiation therapy. Like every time I see the word radiation therapy, it just gives you the radiation-induced regional lung injury, small bowel radiation injury. Radiation injury is radiation therapy, see? Radiation-related breast injuries, radiation-induced intestinal syndromes, radiation-induced brain necrosis. I can show you testimonies of parents whose children, and one parent was a twin daughters. One had brain cancer, and what they done to that kid was just, it was unconscionable, eh? Radiation-induced normal tissue injury, radiation-induced rectal injury, radiation-induced spinal cord recovery from radiation injury, radiation injury to the aorta, branch arteries, radiation-induced bowel injuries from all this radiation therapy. Their favorite, radiation rectal injuries, radiation lung injuries. Are you getting a picture yet? Acute injury of your glands during radiation therapy, radiation-induced liver disease, radiation-induced bile duct injuries, radiation experimental study on acute brain radiation injury. There's so many studies in the brain injury. It was really, there was this pattern that was undeniable. That's one of the things that really upset me, was I would see these patterns. And the problem is, because I'm at it all day, all night, I see it in my sleep way too many times. I see it as I try to sleep way too many times. How do you get all this out of your brain when you're at it 24 hours a day? You don't, in other words, you don't become desensitized to it despite the fact. So how can they, is the question, because I can't. Radiation-induced brain injury. Modifications, radiation-induced brain injuries. Radiation brain injuries, I mentioned radiation brain injuries by any chance from radiation therapy? Don't worry. Brainstem injuries after intense modulator radiation therapy. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Language decline after brain radiation therapy. the nerve of them to call it radiation therapy is just like, wow, man, you are some sick freaking people, buddy. Radiation therapy. Every time I hear, like, it's a gallows laugh, because you're going to be pretty freaking evil to put the word therapy in any of this. But that's what this is. All of this is from radiation therapy. Recurring brain tumors from radiation therapy. Radiation injury / radiation therapy. Well, you can't get the radiation injury without the radiation therapy. Like, you know, I had cancer a couple of years ago, and when I hear like radiation therapy, I'm like, I'd rather jump off a cliff, Doc. Study on radiation-induced brain injuries. Radiotherapy. Get your radiation therapy. And I'm not going to put you through all of it, but I have so much of it This is just not even a fraction of it. There was one weekend where I just went after these types of study, and I was reading as much as I could. And I got so nauseated, couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I was like, it was really bad. And then I came to my senses and said, well, because I associate these studies with people and their families and victims and incredible heartaches and heartbreaks that are created by this industry on each one of these victims. Doesn't escape me, right? This is not a game. I'm not here busting myself to pieces every day. I can because it's fun, it's trendy, it's popular, it's nuts, right? This radiation therapy it's like, come here, I kills you. That's basically what they're saying to the victims. Come here, I fucking destroy your life. Yeah. It's whether they don't spit on them when they're doing it to them. It wouldn't surprise me if they do. If they're unconscious, they most likely do. It's a real sick industry. It's sick people, man. You got to be missing chromosomes to keep doing this to children and everybody else. You got to be some sick, twisted, demented creature to keep that particular jobs. What do you want? How much of it would you need for me to show you, to convince you this industry is insane? 3 billion brilliant nuclear stocks to buy now and hold for the long term. Motley Fool. Anytime and the Globe and Mail, the grossest of the grossest. They're the biggest media in Canada, but they're disgusting. They are disgusting parasites. 3 brilliant nuclear stocks to buy and hold for the long term. Because you ain't going to make any money off it in this century. Numerous nations have signed a declaration to triple nuclear capacity. Therefore, they want you to buy nuclear stocks. What it is the nuclear companies. So Constellation Energy, why would you buy? Like, you got the same amount of gigawatts now as you had in the 90s. There is no nuclear renaissance. There's a nuclear renaissance of scumbags. That's the nuclear renaissance of idiots and monsters and degenerate scum. Right? The nuclear renaissance is the nuclear powerhouses are full of idiots and monsters and degenerate scum. That's the only nuclear renaissance that exists. This is an industry of incredible scumbaggery. Incredible scumbags. Alright, I guess that's it. James got some new music. Let's go have a look at that. And he had up another song last night. We're not going to get to tonight. We're going to go for the newest one, but nuclear exceptionalism. He put up another song last night, snuck out on us. Hold Me Like a Spent Fuel Rod. Now that's funny, man. I listened to it last night. I blew up laughing when I seen the headline of it. He's sneaking out another song on me. That's just me being funny. Hang on here. I just put my phone back in the case. Alrighty. That's 290 counts per minute. 308 counts per minute. Holy shit. That's not good. Definitely not good. Oop, I'm on the wrong wire. Hang on. Alrighty. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far. Look at James go, man. Holy shit. Nuclear exceptionalism. Blech. I'm tired now, so start slurring everything. Well, we made it. We got a show punched in. It's still early because I normally do my shows 10 p.m. my time. So my show's over is typically around midnight. And there's no way I'm going to last till midnight tonight. So I'm going to adjust the volume. As usual, if you've been around before, you know that about me. I'm going to make sure he's in 1080. Now, James is a musician and an artist and a filmmaker, and he does it with AI. He's the only guy in history to do that in anti-nuclear. There's over 300 anti-nuclear songs and videos. He's got some incredible... He doesn't just do songs, mostly music and video, but he also does this kind of like unique artwork where he creates something that he knows is different, and he put a bit of music in the background, and it's about the nuclear industry. It's incredible footage, incredible valuable footage to someone like me that I'm going to eventually start incorporating that video into all of my videos, because you can't find that footage without copyright, right? All right, hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. We'll see you on the back end. Hopefully tomorrow night. Take care, folks. Get over and give James some love, man. Give him a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't.
They said it was clean, too cheap to meter. Built the dome, then cooked the beaker. Said the rod was safe as sealed in drums, but left them leaking out of Idaho slums. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. They chase the sun, all fusion proud. Ignore the barrels stacked in clouds. Promise stars in every socket, while curium settled in the market. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Chart is clean, while whales rolled up beside the submarine. Blame the algae, blame the rain, but never trace the gamma chain. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Now the rods are rusting, the record spins. Mama warned them, too many sins. Keep your son, keep your lab coat pride, till you fix the waste you tried to hide. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done.
I love it. That was awesome, man. Holy shit. That one's got huge potential. And so have you. Make sure you subscribe and get the message out there. Come on board the winning team. See you in the next one. Take care, folks.